All right. So we are going to start our bi-weekly Sutta discussion now. We are on YouTube and Facebook Live. Let us begin our bi-weekly Sutra discussion by paying respect and homage to the Buddha by reciting Namo Tassa 3 times together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I pay my respect and homage to him, the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened Buddha. Dear Venerable Dhamma friends, my colleague members of the Sangha, and dear friends in Dhamma who are joining us and watching us on Facebook and YouTube Live, I would like to welcome all of you to our bi-weekly Sutra discussion. So before we begin our discussion, I would like to briefly introduce all our participating monks and nuns from different cities. Bante Katugastruda Uparatana Nayaka Mahatero is joining us from Washington, D.C. And then today we have Bante Yogavachara Rahula. He is the author of One Night Shelter, which is a very famous book, which has been translated into several languages, including Sinhala. And Bante Yogavachara Rahula is joining us for the first time, from Washington, D.C. And I'm very grateful to you, Bante, for accepting our invitation to join our bi-weekly Sutta discussion. And it is an inspiration and motivation for all of us to have your presence during this bi-weekly Sutta discussion. And then we have Bante Suddhaso joining us from New York, and we missed you for almost how many weeks? But you're busy. Welcome back. And we have Bante Jinananda joining us from Ottawa. And we have Ayya Soma. Again, good to see you, Ayya Soma, after a few weeks. I think you and Bante Suddhasa were very busy with your Empty Cloud Monastery activities. Then we have Bante Pemaratana from Pittsburgh, and we also missed you, Bante Pemaratana. I think you were very busy with your new temple and plus your postdoctoral studies. And today we are very happy to have you. And we have Bante Kamalasuri joining us from Minnesota. And then we also did not have your presence for a few weeks. Good to have you back. And we have Venerable Yutta Dhammo Bhikkhu from Stony Creek, Hamilton, near Niagara Falls. And even we did not see you because you were busy with teaching or conducting meditation session at Brock University in St. Catharines. But today you joined us. Welcome back. And we have Bante Kusala from our temple. Other venerable monks and nuns, maybe they are going to join us later on. Maybe they are just watching us on Facebook and YouTube Live. So 2 weeks ago, we had this discussion on the Samma Ditti Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 9, Samma Ditti Sutta, Discourse on the Right View. And we had a very productive discussion, and our venerable monks and nuns beautifully explained the right view based on this sutta, and it was the view of the many people, and including the monks and nuns, to have the second discussion regarding the same sutta. And I'm very positive all of you have read this sutta, and you know what is this sutta is all about. And we are talking about the right view, and it's a group of monks who visited Venerable Sariputta, and after exchanging greetings, Venerable Sariputta spoke to the monks or visiting monks. Or we say one is of right view, then what does it mean to be of right views? And of course, visiting monk said, well, we don't know. We came from far away and we came here to learn from you. So Venerable Sariputta started talking about the right view, Sammaditthi, starting from the unwholesome and wholesome, and the nutriments and the Four Noble Truths, then the dependent origination, and lastly, the taints. So he is talking about the right view in 16 ways, starting from unwholesome and wholesome, and then the right view on the taints. So we talked about this. So today we would like to talk about, like, practical side of this right view, like, and today I would like to hear from our venerable colleague monks and nuns, like, from the United States, from Italy, and like, you are not born Buddhist, you are not born Buddhist monks, and I'm pretty sure you from in your childhood, maybe due to your parents or tradition or society or culture, you had a different view. And of course, the Venerable Yuta Dhamma from Canada, you had a different view. And maybe people are kind of curious, like, what view, what kind of view that caused you to change or transform your life. Now, do you think what you follow right now is the right view, or is there a particular story that help you to have this Sammaditthi? Maybe I'm putting this question in a very simple way. So I would like to begin with Bhante Yoga Vachara Rahula. And your life story is pretty interesting, Bhante. And those who read One Night Shelter, they got to know everything you did. I think in that book, you're just talking about everything, all your experiences, whatever you did, and you had a different lifestyle as a layperson, but you titled the book One Night Shelter. I'm pretty sure that that is based on maybe what we are talking about today, Sammaditthi, right view. Do you have anything to talk about or say about that, Bhante, Rahula?
Okay, well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit with you all. Yeah. And yeah, the title of the book, One Night Shelter, actually it's a metaphor for impermanence and the impermanence of life.
Yeah.
The fact that since we were born, we physically, we grow up and, we're a baby, then we're a toddler, then we're a young teenager, then we might be a Boy Scout, a Cub Scout, that we do, become maybe a college athlete, or then in my case, I was a soldier in the army for a few years, and after that, I was a wandering hippie going, across Europe to India, and having all these different experiences. And when I eventually came to the Dhamma, that I may get to in a minute, I was able to reflect back on all those, that evolving life, and how each of those phases, or especially the ones later on, were driven by greed, hatred, and delusion, and just following the crowd and not really having any view of any type of view of life. So when I had a powerful experience in the Tibetan meditation course, then I could reflect back and see how each experience that we have in life basically is just a temporary shelter for our mind to identify with. Oh, now I'm a Cub Scout. Now I'm a Boy Scout. Now I'm a soldier. Now I'm a hippie. Now I'm this or that. Now I'm a college professor. I'm not, but if I was. Or now I'm a Buddhist monk, right? So anyway, these are all just passing experiences that the mind goes through. And hopefully, we see that as a kind of a evolutionary path. So a lot of people say, wow, you told about all those bad things you did in your life. You shouldn't say that, you're a Buddhist monk. I says, look, I'm not, on one hand, I'm not ashamed of it, because it ended up that I became a Buddhist monk, right? If I hadn't had a lot of those experiences, who knows? I may not have become a monk.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just to explain. So when it came time to get a title for the book, I entitled it One Night Shelter.
Oh, I see. That's pretty interesting. I'm pretty sure this is also something to do with the. Do you think there's a kind of something help you to build this right view? Oh, how do you see this right view? We see in the sutta.
Well, I would like to, say a few words about right view generally.
Yeah.
And, right understanding or right view, basically there's 3 stages of it. And, the Buddha talked about the mundane right view and the supramundane right view. Mm-hmm. Now, along with that, or as part of that, the mundane right view is essentially the intellectual understanding that we get when we first hear the Dhamma. Like for all of us born in Western countries, most of us heard the Dhamma from reading books or hearing lectures. We might not have known anything about Buddhism. Mm-hmm. So we heard that, and a possibility about liberating the mind, and about nirvana, and about greed, hatred, and delusion, and all these things that are mentioned in the Sammaditthi Sutta, the 10 unwholesome actions. We did all those, and and the suffering that comes from that. So, but then just having the intellectual understanding of the Dhamma is not enough. So the second level of right view is when you start to reflect on it, and you kind of study the Dhamma a little bit more and reflect on what you're doing, like how the law of karma is working in your life, and how the various things that you do have, come back to you as certain results. So especially about, the greed, hatred, and delusion, and, the causes of suffering, we can see that quite clearly, and if we reflect on it. But you have to reflect on it, and that would include the beginnings processes of meditation, practicing mindfulness. Yes. Reflecting on the 4 Noble Truths. So therefore, your understanding of the Dhamma gets a little bit deeper. It's not only intellectual, but that intellectual spurs you on to start practicing. So you start practicing, maybe observing 5 precepts or some precepts. Practicing meditation. And then by doing that, you see the effects of doing, your understanding of karma goes a little bit deeper than just an intellectual understanding. And then eventually, when you've developed enough, the spiritual faculties and so on, then you will reach the stages of profound insights, which culminate in the Magga and Phala. And it's only when one reaches the state of a Sotapanna that one is really said to have right view. And we can see this in the sutta also, that, understanding all these various categories that you mentioned, that culminates in the uprooting of the defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion, and attaining that path, the right view. And only that is when it is said to be really right view. It really means the supramundane right view. Now, I want to relate that to an experience that I had.
Yes, ma'am.
Because when I first heard about the Buddhism, was actually in a world religions class that I took in junior college in 1971. And we studied the major world religions, and we had to write a paper about the one we liked the most. So I chose Buddhism. I don't really know why, but at that time, in 1971, I went to a big library in my town. There was only 4 books on Buddhism in the whole library.
Yeah.
And but anyway, I wrote a paper on the book, and the teacher praised my understanding, and I got an A+ on the book. But so I got this intellectual understanding. But at that time, there was no Buddhist centers in my town, or very few, even in America. Maybe in New York or in Los Angeles, there could have been some places, but in 1971, really not much. Or if it was Chinese or Buddhist, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't do any follow-up really. And there weren't any other books around. So I kind of forgot about it, and I didn't reflect on it. I didn't go from right view to the right thought and, to think about the Dhamma. And so therefore I got caught back up into taking drugs and drinking and partying and this kind of things, and getting into some trouble, and which cultivated ultimately in getting put in prison in Afghanistan. But anyway, so I'm just stating that to show the importance of transitioning from the intellectual an intellectual right view, that it doesn't do much good unless you start reflecting on it at a deeper level, and which includes, meditation, the beginning practices of developing, mindfulness and concentration. So that came later when I went to a Tibetan meditation course. There in the Tibet, well, later on, actually, after I wrote that paper, I also took transcendental meditation. Now, that was a kind of meditation, but they didn't give any really right view, not from the Dhamma or the Buddhist point of view. And they didn't give you much to reflect about. They just said, chant this mantra, you get a little bit of kind of a samadhi, and, it's helpful and so on. But because of that, it wasn't too stimulating. So therefore, I kind of put that aside too. So in those 2 cases, the first case, the intellectual understanding didn't lead to reflection and meditation. Then just the meditation practice didn't lead to reflection or, deeper spiritual insights necessarily, although I didn't give it that much time, I have to admit. But it was only later when I took this Tibetan meditation course in Nepal with Tibetan lamas. Actually, we got a Lam Rim course, and there's a lot of Theravada teachings in the Lam Rim course. And they had it laid out. The structure of that course was really these 3 levels. First, they had a book, and you read a book on certain topics, such as 4 Noble Truths and so on. And then the Lama gave 2 or 3 lectures on the subject. And then immediately afterward, you sat to meditate and think about it and reflect on those things. So that's what was very powerful for me, you know, and doing those things in that order and in that immediate sequence, you know, not just hearing a lecture and then wait 2 or 3 days later and meditate. No, as soon as you stop hearing the lecture, you go into meditation and you focus your attention. You try to remember what was going on in that, you know, whatever, if you read it in a book or the Dhamma talk. And for me personally, it was like every time I read a new chapter, heard a lecture, meditated, it was like another piece of a jigsaw puzzle being put into place because of that kind of powerful supportive, you know, support of both the intellectual and then reflecting on that in meditation and then going deeper into the silence. So that was a very powerful experience for me. And I think because of that combination of practicing those 3 in that kind of a environment, I wound up having a very powerful, you know, life-changing experience. So that's what I wanted to share about this, you know, the right view in terms of those 3 levels of right view. And the super mundane right view doesn't come, you know, immediately, automatically.
No, thank you, Bhante. So, in your understanding, the right view comes from reflection or contemplation.
It deepens your intellectual understanding.
Okay, yeah.
So it deepens the understanding. But while you're doing that, you're gaining some type of mindfulness, you're gaining some concentration, and you're also gaining some panya, you know, some clear comprehension, even though it might not be to an advanced level. Even so, you are developing the factors of enlightenment, at least to a small degree. And eventually they will get stronger and stronger, you know, as you're practicing, of course, the rest of the Eightfold Path and so on.
So thank you, Bhante. And of course, this is an open discussion, and anyone can ask questions from each other. Even if you have any question to ask from Bhante Rahula, please feel free to do so. And a kind reminder to our friends who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube, if you have any question, please make a comment. We will take your question as well. I see Bhante Kamalasri from Minnesota. You say raise his hand. Bhante, you have something to ask or share with us?
Thank you so much. My question, I have a question for Bhante Rahula.
Okay.
After the Second World War, many of American people went to Asia. You also was one of them. Then again, them came back to America. Then my question is, did you add anything to American culture? And especially in thinking way or for samadhi?
Well, I of course I lived in Sri Lanka for about 10 years before you know, coming back, and so I mean, just naturally the presence of an American wearing robes wasn't that common back in those days. So, but by that time I came back in the mid 80s, and of course Buddhism was a little bit well known. I mean, more known. So people would they would say, Hare Krishna, you know, and I would say Hare Buddha, and they would go, oh, Hare Buddha, oh, okay. So, you know, it seems that they, you know, knew a little bit of, could distinguish a little bit on that. And then, of course, also one of my features of my training when I was beginning my Buddhist practice, I also studied yoga in India and was learning some very valuable practices in yogic breathing and exercises that helped me to meditate a great deal. It improved my meditation probably, many-fold. The ability to sit, still with less pain, and to be able to sit still with more alertness, overcoming the hindrances. So it helped me overcome thinna, midda, and endure pains, because when you're doing yoga postures and so on, it opens up the energy channels and you endure the pain of postures. So all of that was helpful for my meditation practice, which in Buddhist monasteries, they tend to neglect that aspect of it, about posture, having a good posture, and even some aspects of deep, slow breathing, developing that, which can be a very useful way of getting grounded in the body and centered in the present moment, where the deeper meditation begins, really. So I started to teach that when I came back and was in Los Angeles for a couple of years, and came to the Bhavana Society. So that was maybe one thing I added, kind of a bridge between the body and the mind, because a lot of times in yoga, they see yoga is just physical exercise. I mean, people who are not very educated. And a lot of Buddhists, they just think it's a mental exercise or just about the mind. But really, you can't separate the body and mind except at the very highest levels of concentration. And the mind affects the body affects the mind. So that was my approach in integrating certain aspects, not all of it, but certain aspects of the yoga that I found the most helpful for myself, along with the meditation, and especially the vipassana meditation. Because in yoga, you're also, when you're holding postures, you're feeling all the body sensations, no? And that's also part of mindfulness of the body and Vedanusati too. So it helps you to get a good grounding in that. So I think that's one of the, things I might have contributed in a very small way to, spread the practice of meditation, which, for some people.
Yeah, so Bhante Kusala, you also raised your hand. Do you have anything to add, or you have a question to ask?
It's not a question. Venerable Yogacharya Rahula's story really intrigued me. He is known in Sri Lanka very much through his books and the work.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have not met the Venerable, I hear of him about his blog and also about his travels and Dharma talks from different sources. So I'm grateful that this discussion went on opening the avenues about how the Venerable came to somewhat like right view, and emphasizing on the gradual transition from right view to the next level, which is, I think, very significant that Bhante mentioned. The importance of that transition happening to us. It happens in the mind. And Venerable Kamal Siri's question about what he brought to America, I think that's how I understood it. But I think that has also been answered. And for me, I don't want to steer too far away from that line of discussion. Part of me wants to talk about how I was introduced to Buddhism, but another part wants to discuss about this Kukkuta Mitta story, because Venerable Rahula mentioned about someone coming to Sotapanna, a stream enterer, who has a firm right view, and then onward they end up reaching to the final goal, nirvana. So maybe I'll talk about that first and then see where the discussion goes. So this is from Dhammapada, it's 124th verse of Dhammapada. And there's a story about a hunter in Rajagaha. and he was very handsome. So when he came to the town, this millionaire family's daughter fell in love with him and went with him to the forest and lived for so many years and had 7 children. All of them were sons, and they were married to daughters from other families, and all of them lived such a successful hunting life, very well established. And the Buddha saw the potential of this family reaching Sotapanna stage, which is the stage of understanding, opening the Dhamma eye, becoming stream winners. So, so the Buddha went to this forest, really probably released those animals and put his footprints near where the traps were set for those animals. And the hunter came to the place where he set those traps, and then he saw there were no animals being caught, and he saw the Buddha sitting under a tree nearby, and the hunter got so furious and wanted to take revenge, so he wanted to shoot the arrow toward the Buddha, and at that point he froze like a stone. He couldn't make a move, and his 7 children, 7 sons, came to look for him, and all of them saw what had happened, and gradually they all froze just like their father did. And now the wife and the daughters also came, and immediately after seeing the Buddha, she said, "Look, my father has come all this way to help me. Please show respect to him. Throw away those arrows." And then immediately those men thought, "Oh, this must be her father. We haven't seen him, so let us now show respect to him." At that point, the Buddha taught them the importance of not killing and being firm on their virtues, and gradually being free from all these evil things, animal harms that they have done. So later, when the Buddha, so 15 of them became stream winners on that day. There were the 7 sons and 7 daughters and the father. So the monks asked, what about the wife? Why did she not become a stream winner? At that point, the Buddha said she had already become a stream winner when she was at home in Rajagaha. And then the monks were really concerned, like why, like how come she was supporting a hunter if she was a stream winner, and that she supported like bringing the arrows to the hunter? Was it not supporting the killing of those animals? At that point, the Buddha said, when you have that right view and this understanding as a stream winner, it has this glove effect, the gloves that we put on our hands. And it's like you have, panim hiche vano nasa haraya panina visam nabbanang visamanveti natti papang akubato. You can have, if you don't have a wound in your hand, you can even handle poison. Poison does not affect one who has no wound. There can be no evil for one who has no evil intention. So now, you see, this lady, this woman, she was already a stream winner, and she never had that intention of supporting any killing of any animal. So the intention is so important. Intention is karma, according to Buddhism. And we discussed earlier about how we gradually come to deepen our understanding of right view. And she held that kind of a view. And as soon as she saw the Buddha, her faith brought her so much forward, closer to the Buddha, and even assisted in changing lives of those other 15 people who were with her in her life. So this story, as we are bringing stories here from our lives and also stories from the scripture, we see the importance of, having this transition from right view to right intentions. Like right intentions include avihimsa, non-harming. And you see that transition has happened in this lady's mind, and the Buddha recognized that. So that's what I wanted to add into this discussion.
No, thank you, Bhante Kusala, for telling that story from the textbook. As I said, in our email communication today, we are going to discuss the right view in the practical way and practical aspect of the right view. And we started with Bhante Rahula's story, and then you told us this hunter's story from the textbook, from the Dhammapada. And I'm pretty sure this is of great benefit to our viewers. And Bhante Jinananda, you raised hand. Do you have anything to add, or do you have any story to tell, or do you have any questions to ask?
It's a form of everything, Bhante. So
Okay.
I'm very delighted to hear from Venerable Yogavachar Rahula first, because he's one of my teachers in many ways. So I will start with him, and of course what he had always said about meditation, samadhi. And I was at the Great Lake Buddhist Vihara in 2009. I was able to participate his my first retreat, which he conducted at the Bhavana Monastery. And after that, after 2009, there was a retreat he conducted here in Ottawa. So I was one of the participants for these long retreats. One thing triggered me a lot of his many statements. He made many good statements during his 1 hour, 1.5 hour Dhamma talks every day after the meditation. One thing he said that is really interesting, and from my point of view, he said that he went to Sri Lanka from India by ships in the middle of his seeking truth in Buddha's teaching. And before he landed, he thought that Sri Lankans, everyone, monks and lay people, have cushions for meditation at home, at temples, and everywhere. Under each tree, monks and lay people sit every day and meditate. But when he said that when he landed there, he did find that not even temples have cushions for meditation. So I was in the retreat listening to this, and that hits me so hard to encourage myself to meditate. And I was sharing that inspiring story with many devotees. Look at Bhante Rahula said this, and he is a very good friend of us, and he did all this for us to encourage. And that is what I took from him from the first retreat I attended, which he conducted, and he used to tell it us in our normal conversation. And also Venerable Kamal Sri asked what he brought to the North American soil from his experience. Actually, he encouraged a lot of Sri Lankan monks too, in many ways, to get samadhi, and I'm really proud of it. And then what he said was really interesting, because all the facts in Samadhi Sutta in number 16 are all practical things. Jara, Marana, and death and aging is a practical thing. And then Upadana, attachment to thing, is a practical thing. Craving, then many of those things are practical. And when we talk about how to conceptualize the Samadhi in day-to-day life, we can see those facts Venerable Sariputta talk about in our day-to-day life. Let me share my story now with regard to the important factor that how we conceptualize samadhi in day-to-day life. When I was a young boy, I was taken to temple, as many of you were taken by your parents to temple to, give us to the sasana. So then I cried a lot because that was the second time I left my parents, and I did not have any courage to bear that pain. So I was not eating, I was not doing anything at temple. So my chief monk took me to the street and showed me the bus. And if you, you cannot, have a monk with this kind of behavior. So you may come back if you think that this place is the good place for you. Then I went back home, and my father told me that that was the only chance you had to travel everywhere in the world, because becoming a monk is a passport or visa to go around the world, at least in Sri Lanka. Because my father didn't know how to travel, or he didn't know anything about, but he used to tell that if you want to travel everywhere in the world, just go and become a monk. And he added that we all die one day, and you are not going to live with us all the time. We are not sure whether we live any decades or so. That was I was 12 plus, and that was the time I got the point that we all die, and my mother, my father, they are still living. They all die, and I would be alone in the world. So that if I want to be, okay and balanced, and in order to overcome suffering, I should be a monk. So that was the time a kind of mundane samadhi arose in my mind, so that what I was thinking at that time to stay at home was going immediately from my mind. I said next day that I should go and become a monk. I never had that thought here after that. So that samadhi actually helped me a lot to become a monk, as well as to stay in this monastic life successfully, associating beautiful monks like you. Because one of the things my teachers told me when I got ready to come to America in 2008 to the Great Lake Buddhist Vihara, remember the two stories of parrots. It is from Jataka stories.
Yeah.
So those who go abroad will experience something like those two parrots. And if you have good friends, you will be like the parrots who who fell onto the monastery and speak good words.
Yeah.
And you will be like the parrots who are with pirates and thugs people. If you meet bad people. Fortunately, I had Bante Mudita, Bante Sankit, and all the good monks at the Great Lake Buddhist Vihara, and monks around that, and most importantly, Bante Rahul, Bante Gunaratana, and all of you. So I think samadhi could be a quality of you if you have good friends around you. I think a lot of stories are there to share, but I think this is enough for now.
Yeah.
And I thank all the monks, including Venerable Rahul, for unfolding a lot of beautiful stories to encourage us to have samadhi. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante Jinananda. That was a beautiful and inspiring story. How you became a monk with this bite that if you become a monk, that will be the passport so that you can travel around the world. But later on, you develop the real samadhi. I think this is a very inspiring story. Thank you for sharing your experience for everyone's benefit. So I see Venerable Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu raised his hand, and I'm pretty sure Venerable Yuttadhammo, being a Canadian Buddhist monk, I knew him even before he became a monk. We met at the at McMaster University. When I went to the McMaster University to do my master's degree, he saw me and he was so excited to see a Buddhist monk in the in the university. So we had a nice conversation. Yeah, Samanana
It was
Jadasanam.
such a blessing to see.
Yeah, so dear friends, Venerable Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu just published a book. It's called Practical Buddhism. And maybe in our next session, we might have a good discussion, but I don't know how to do that. But we will talk about that. Yutadamba Bhikkhu, you have something to share with us.
Okay, well, I can share part of my story.
Yeah.
It's always so great to hear from all of you, and again and again, take all of you as teachers. I want to say specifically something that touches on what Bhante Kusala was talking about. When I was young, I got the idea to become a hunter. My father was a hunter. I just want to, what I'd like to talk about a little bit, and what's been on my mind since I heard about this discussion about right view, is how rich a word it is, and how we can often fall into the pigeonholing of the word in terms of saying view is just your belief, right? We equate view with belief, but the word view is so rich because it has to do with vision, right? And it has to do with perspective. And these are very much a part of what the Buddha talked about throughout. And you can see the pattern where the Buddha used words like view, dasana, pasana, vipassana, right? And how he taught us to see things in a new way. So I never thought that hunting would be a bad thing. And because my father was a hunter, it seemed like a good thing. And there are many people who have the view, and often I'm sure many of you have come in contact with people who believe that it's right to kill if you're going to eat. We have a very famous example. The CEO of Facebook explained that he wanted to not just eat meat, but go out and actually kill the animal that he would eat. Here's a rich man who doesn't need to do it, but he thought this is probably the right thing for me to do. So people have this view. I didn't have that view exactly, but something that I think is interesting and I wanted to share is I killed one deer in my life. And when I was in the forest, sitting up on the tree stand, it was such a peaceful experience. So that part of it, of course, was actually quite wholesome. But when the deer came and I lifted the bow to shoot the deer, my whole body shook. I had no view, no idea that killing a deer would be wrong or bad, but it was so difficult for me to do it. And I bring that up. What I think was remarkable in regards to the topic is my intellectual idea of hunting, of killing, was nothing like the reality of having to kill. And this is something that has been deeply impressed upon me throughout my life because of that, where I will often tell people, killing, we don't see what's such a big deal with things like killing and while stealing and doing bad deeds of any kind, until you actually engage in it. And this shows the danger of view and the danger of belief, that your beliefs can be totally dissociated from reality, and when you get into the actual situation, you see things quite differently. When I went to Thailand, of course, and started to practice meditation, I still had no idea that anything that I was doing was wrong. I went to Asia really for the reason of finding wisdom. I looked around for various spiritual centers, but I was also drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana and engaging in all sorts of questionable behaviors. My uncle took me to the red light district in Bangkok, where they have strippers and and none of this really seemed like a problem to me at the time. There was no idea in my mind, no view, no perspective that there was anything wrong, no guilt, no feeling of shame. And it seemed like the right thing, a good thing to do. And it, for them, for many people that I was with, it seemed like a right view. When I went to practice meditation, what shifted was not my view. When we went to the meditation course, well, two things. First of all, what's remarkable is the lack of intellectual information. So as Bhante Rahula said, right view is accomplished by simply having the information. And what was incredibly remarkable to me was how different my life would have been if I had had some role model who had even hinted at the idea that there might be something wrong with killing. I don't know if I would have listened, but I never heard of the 5 precepts. The idea that alcohol could be bad for you, could be a problem, could actually, that you should try to keep your mind clear, and that a clear mind could actually be important. None of this information was even there. But what was really powerful for me was not actually that. It was the change in perspective. Not perspective about ideas like killing or so on, but my perspective on reality and on my own mind. The realization of what I was doing to myself, what alcohol was doing to my mind, what killing, what all sorts of unwholesome activities, and really just negligence, lack of mindfulness was doing. When I sat down and actually had to be with my mind and had to taste my mind, my perspective on my whole life changed. And that's what really made me realize the benefit and the greatness of Buddhism, was the change in perspective. And I think that's a really important part of Buddhism. If you look at how people develop views, and you see this in the world now, there are topics that, some topics that seem to have very concrete evidence that should lead us to certain conclusions and certain views, and yet you see often views that are very much at odds with the evidence. And I think we've all been there. I've been there many times where I've been in a situation where I believed very strongly something. And we're driving down the road, and I say, okay, you have to take a left now. And they said, no, you have to go left. where you have a view, you believe something so strongly, and it turns out to be false. And what Buddhism, I think, and meditation allows us to do that's very important is it allows us to get to the base of the situation so that we have the right perspective that's not exactly view, but allows us the opportunity to investigate objectively and find right view. Because in the case of things like climate change, COVID-19, whether we should get vaccines or so on, you can see how we become so entrenched in our views. And even people who I might think, oh, they have right view about that, can have problematic perspectives because they get very angry and they get very much attached to it. And we'll never be able to really be in a good place, regardless of our views, until we have the right perspective that allows us to grow always. A right view that is based on reality. Our experience has to be grounded in reality. So we have to have the right perspective. And just the last thing, talking about that perspective, really, I think the essential quality of that perspective, the change in perspective that I'm always trying to pass on to my students, is the difference between conventional reality of people and places and things and the ultimate reality of experiences.
Yeah.
Because when it comes down to, if you ask the question, is climate change real? Should I take a COVID-19 vaccine? Because you're dealing with concepts, it's concepts is complicated. And in fact, you can't know the answer. We only have evidence. I'm not trying to be a denier for any of these things. I'm not quite the opposite, but the reason why there's a problem and the reason why people come to wrong view is because when you dwell in concepts, in your mind, you can make all sorts of wrong connections, but you can't do that relating to experience. You can't see seeing as hearing, for example, right? When you're experiencing reality, you can't perceive the body as being the mind. You really can know something on the level of experience that you can't, in a way that you can't know things on a conceptual level. So those are my thoughts on right view.
Thank you. Those are really inspiring stories. Thank you for sharing your personal story, Yuttadhammo. And I knew, dear friends, even Venerable Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu got arrested for walking as a Buddhist monk in California.
There's a perspective thing. They thought I was a streaker, or they claimed to think I was a streaker. I don't know if they had bad intentions or not, but that was the story I got. They thought I was a streaker on the beach.
Yeah. So what I hear so far to develop the Sammaditthi is I think that's why I see there are three words in Pali, Pariyatti, Patipatti, and Pativeda. Of course, first we need to have the knowledge, and then you investigate, you put that into the practice, you reflect, contemplate, then Pativeda, then you realize, then there comes a strong this Sammaditthi right view. And now I see Ayya Soma raised her hand, and I know I'm pretty sure you have, being an Italian, Italian American Buddhist nun. I'm pretty sure there is a story behind you for becoming a nun, and maybe that's based on this Sammaditthi right view. So what's your story?
Thank you, Bhante Saranapala. Well, first of all, I'm not Italian American, I'm just Italian. It's a huge difference.
Okay.
Otherwise, our American viewers might have expectations of me that I will very much disappoint. So yeah, Italians, contrarily to Italian Americans or Americans, are quite unruly. So I was resonating very much with also like what Venerable Yuttadhammo was sharing in terms of approaching morality or approaching life at the very beginning of the practice, or actually before the practice to begin with. So yeah, I feel like as someone who was not born Buddhist, the most interesting thing to me was that, you start practicing Buddhism with the idea that perhaps, attaining first jhana is difficult, let alone fourth jhana, or, perceiving the three characteristics is extremely complex and profound. But then actually you have the realization that the most difficult things that you need to work on at the very beginning are very basic things like not killing or, practicing, looking at the issues that we have with speech. So fundamentally going back to Sila becomes the biggest obstacle. And it's a little bit embarrassing actually to a certain degree, because we tend to overlook it. We tend to go to, perhaps very intensive vipassana retreats or very intensive sort of meditation practice. But then and we, maybe are very good at keeping our mouth shut for 10 days or even 1 month or however long we do it for. But as soon as we come out of that, then we open our mouth and lots of atrocities come out. Or it's very difficult to even understand what the purpose is, to not harm sentient beings. So as someone who was raised in Italy, even though I had a very secular upbringing, my parents weren't particularly religious. It is a Catholic country, so we have Catholic cultural conditioning as we are raised, as we grow up. So my upbringing was that, it was definitely unwholesome to kill things, kill beings, not things, kill sentient beings. But it was mainly in relation to humans. And perhaps when we were talking about animals, it was not unwholesome to kill them. Perhaps it was unwholesome to torture them, and only if they were, of a sort of big size, size that you could actually somewhat relate to. But the smaller the creature, the more sort of insignificant the action was. And so when I came to Buddhist practice, I was actually a serial killer of mosquitoes. I committed genocides. And I really had found nothing wrong with that. Actually, quite the opposite. I found it very bizarre that all of a sudden it was asked to me not to kill mosquitoes. So as long as I was like, say I went to Bhavana Society for a week and I did my meditation practice there, and I was all right, I can do this for a week. But when we started, and I was still a lay person back then, our retreat center in Rockaway Beach in New York City, together with Bhante Sudaso. And, I had taken the 5 precepts, and we were having retreats on a regular basis every week. So we had this ant infestation from day 3, basically. And these ants that probably actually Venerable Yuttadabo and Bhante Rahula might both remember, since they both led retreats at the Rockaway Summer House, the retreat center there. They were very, active and very much participating in all the retreats. So crawling on people while they were meditating, but most importantly, getting into every single thing that reminded them of sugar, of sweetness. So whether it was honey or, sugar on the table, or perhaps if someone had added some, a little bit of sweetener in the sauce, so in the food. But even in the shower, apparently, like there are certain, soaps that have a very sweet sort of taste to the ants, and they would go there in flocks. And so basically this required every single day to clean up carefully and sweetly and, try not to harm these ants. And at the very beginning, my mind was full of hatred and full of anger and full of, irritation, not only at the ants, but actually at Buddhism and at the precepts. And I was like, this is so stupid. Like literally, I was like, I can't believe we could just call, someone who would take care of this infestation of ants, and my life would be so much better, and I wouldn't have all these trials and tribulations, all these hours. So I just have to practice this stupid precept. And so I kept on practicing there. And my mind was actually, I have to be honest, like full of hatred for quite some time. At least like the first year was really dense and there was no progress. But, I would catch myself actually, perhaps also fooling myself that I was practicing the precept by like, maybe opening up the water and going, oh, I'm not seeing the ants. They're like floating around. So I was still kind of like killing, but creating some deliberate sort of ignorance. Until then I would catch myself and go, okay, well, I've taken this precept. This is, pretending, ignorantly killing the ant. So, I trained myself. And at the very beginning, once again, the hatred was there, but it started transforming as time went by, until one day I remember there was this ant on the rim of the sink where I was washing my hands. And instead of my mind producing this thought of, oh, damn ant, now I have to lift her up, my first instinct was to rescue the ant and bring her to safety so that the water wouldn't affect her and she wouldn't go down the drain. And I remember so clearly that moment, because for the first time, my mind instinctively went to compassion rather than irritation. And there was no suffering in the mind. And in that moment, I understood why the Buddha told us, not immediately to go and practice compassion, but rather practice not harming. So creating the conditions for then compassion to arise naturally as a result in the mind. And it was such an incredible teaching that sort of the intellectual understanding or the intellectual practice of the precepts hadn't brought, but the actual practice of the precepts then led me to compassion and led me to this release from suffering. And that's when I just started loving, adding up all the precepts. From 5, I went to 8, from 8, I went to 10, and now I'm 311. And there's so much happiness, more and more freedom of mind. But it's so directly like in opposition to the sort of ideas that we have at the very beginning. We tend to think, when I first went to Bhavana Society, that was the first time actually I met a monk. It was Bhante Sudaso, who was, younger than 50 years old. And I remember my first thought when I saw him in line, after all the more senior Sri Lankan monks, and I was like, oh, there's like a 20-something monk. I was like 20-year-old monk. I remember thinking, wow, he must have been really depressed that he ordained. Because who in their right mind, would renounce all this sensual pleasure and become a Buddhist monk in a religion that they weren't even born in, it was so, I could understand perhaps, if I had met Bhante Rahula, I would have gone, sorry, not Bhante Rahula, Bhante Kusala, I would have gone, okay, yes, clearly he was born in Sri Lanka, so that's his culture. But when I met Bhante Sudaso, it was so so relatable to me. And at the same time, I thought, absolutely, he must be depressed. It must be something really awful that has happened to him. And definitely he's not, it's quite the opposite of happy. But then I started meeting, I actually met him and I met other younger monks, and they were so happy in comparison to all the people that I knew that were supposedly, so much happier, including myself, with sensual pleasure. And so there's this sort of instinctive recognition that there is something else, right, than what we think is conducive to happiness. But at the same time, I think if we're not born Buddhist and we have the bad karma of not having had the Dhamma as the first religion that we were born with, then there needs to be a leap of faith, because pretty much everything else around us, the majority of people tell us the opposite. So there has to be something, like I remember clearly in my mind where I was like, okay, there is, I don't know what it is, but this is worth exploring. And then, kind of perhaps making the determination, at least this is what worked for me, to prove the Buddha wrong. I was like, okay, I'm going to practice this, and I'm going to see if, really is really leading to this result, or if actually there is another way to lead to the same result. Yeah. And a hate type, actually, I have to say that I haven't been ever able to prove the Buddha wrong, which is why actually my mind is full of faith in the Buddha, because I have a lot of Dhamma.
Buddha openly asks everyone to make him, like if you can make him wrong, please feel free to do so and come and let's discuss. But so far, actually, no scientist was able to do that. But I'm glad to hear, Ayya Soma, you are not a serial killer of mosquitoes anymore. That's the samadhi that put into right direction. So I see Bhante Sudaso raised his hand. Actually, I see pretty interesting activities that you're running in New York City, going up Pindapata. People are watching you. They are serving you something with all these young American monks and nuns. And so I'm pretty sure, Bhante Sudaso, you have a pretty interesting story to tell about right view. And maybe people are kind of curious, a young American, like a boy, maybe you were a teen by then when you became a monk. What made you to become a monk? Is that the right view or something else? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
You have to speak up.
No. Can you hear me?
Volume up, please.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Now
Great.
You can hear. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this good?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, as far as what led me to practicing in the first place, what it really came from was I had this deep intuitive sense that enlightenment was possible. And this came for me as a teenager, and I didn't really understand yet what enlightenment was, or what that would mean, or what it would be like. I didn't have any concept of it really beyond this idea that it was possible to have some kind of direct understanding of the true nature of reality. So I had this intuitive sense that this was possible, and that there must be some kind of mental training that we could do that would lead to this kind of direct realization, this direct wisdom. And I also had a sense that that would be a source of happiness, that to have this true understanding through personal experience would be a source of true happiness as well. And I can't really say where this concept came from because it wasn't my upbringing. So I was raised by Protestant Christians, so very conservative, literal interpretation of the Bible, so this very far right, literalist Protestant Christianity. That's how I was raised, and I stopped believing in it when I was 13. So I went from extreme wrong view to no view. Or at least what I thought was no view, but actually it just meant I was falling into a different set of wrong views. So I was falling into wrong views of non-morality. So the wrong view that what we do doesn't really matter, that as long as you get away with it, that it's okay. So for most of my teenage years, I had this belief that I could do pretty much whatever I wanted, and it didn't matter as long as I didn't get caught. As long as nobody was going to punish me or get revenge on me, it didn't matter what I did. But it still, I had this intuitive sense that it was possible to have some kind of deep breakthrough of wisdom, to develop a genuine understanding of reality and a happiness from that genuine wisdom. So that led me to explore a lot of different spiritual systems, and it eventually led me to studying Buddhism and starting to practice some Buddhist meditation. This was in my late teens when I was 17. So practicing some Buddhist meditation, getting deeper into studies of Buddhism, and then when I was 20 to go and live at a Buddhist monastery. And so that's what I've done ever since. So since the age of 20, I've been living in Buddhist monasteries continuously. And I became ordained in my early 20s. What I really want to talk about is not so much what led me to monastic life per se, but rather what I like to talk about is some of the really major changes that occurred in me as a result of developing intellectual right view. There's a few really central concepts to right view, which I think it's really important to speak very directly and bluntly about these things. And these three things are karma, rebirth, and devas. So these are three concepts contained within right view that really radically shifted my perspective on life, and especially radically shifted my perspective on the decisions that I make, the choices that I make with my life, and how I go about deciding to do whatever it is I do. So first off, the idea of karma, the idea that everything we're experiencing is the result of our own past actions, whether past in this life or in previous lives, and also that everything we do in the present moment will have future consequences for us, either later in this life or in future lives. So this concept of karma then got me to really consider, like, what am I doing in each moment, and what are the consequences of that going to be? So even if I get away with it in the sense that nobody else finds out about it, or nobody else is going to think poorly of me or do anything to punish me or get revenge or whatever. So even if I don't get any negative effects right here and right now, I've still created the karma, which means I will inevitably, unavoidably get some consequences for what I've done. So this really changed the way I looked at my behavior. And of course, rebirth being a important part of this, because it's recognizing that even if I somehow manage to escape consequences for this whole life, then the consequences will just appear in a future life. So these ideas of karma and rebirth, they really got me to think deeply about what choices I'm making, whether those choices are wholesome or unwholesome, whether they're good or evil, and recognizing that there's no escaping the karma that I'm making. And considering also the good and bad conditions that I have in my life. It's like, well, the good conditions I have are because I've made good choices in past lives. And the bad conditions are because I've made bad choices in past lives. So again, that gets me thinking, what am I doing right now? Am I creating the karma that will lead to having supportive conditions, good conditions in the future? Or am I creating karma that will lead to bad conditions? So this idea that I cannot escape the consequences of my own choices. And related to that is the idea of devas. So there's a sutta, and I don't remember off the top of my head which one it is. So maybe one of the other venerables will remember and remind me. But there's a sutta where it says one can reflect. If one is tempted to do something bad, like tempted to break a precept or do something unwholesome, then you can think, there are devas who might see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
They might see my actions. They might even see my thoughts, and they would not approve. They would be very disappointed with what I'm doing. They would be disappointed with what I'm thinking even. So that thought that there are devas who watch us and see what we're doing, and some of them, they know what the Buddha taught, and they know when we're not following the Buddha's teachings. This also I found really potent, this reflection. It's like, yeah, I can't consider everything I do private. Like there's not really any such thing as privacy because we can't hide from the devas. They can come right through the wall and invisibly watch us. In fact, they're probably watching us right now. We can't hide from the devas. But most importantly, we can't hide from ourselves. Because we carry our own karma with us everywhere we go. So if we're creating bad karma, then that's, it's like we're piling feces on our own heads. It's like we can't blame anybody else for that, but we're carrying it with us everywhere that we go. And everywhere we go, it's going to make our life unpleasant and uncomfortable. Whereas if we're cultivating good karma, then that will also go with us everywhere we go. So these concepts of karma in particular, they really brought about a radical shift in my own character and the way I was making choices and thinking about what I was doing with my life moment by moment. So I just wanted to contribute that to the conversation.
No, that's amazing. I think that is the way you're seeing, perceiving the teachings, what led you to live this life as a monk. I think this statement you made, whatever you're doing, devas are watching you. They may not be talking to you, but they are witnessing, they are watching everything. They can see. People may not see, but the devas are seeing everything. I think that's amazing. So we have Bhante Pemaratana from Pittsburgh raised his hand, and I'm pretty positive Bhante Pemaratana has something interesting to add to today's discussion on right view. Bhante Pemaratana. You have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Thank you, Bhante. My reverential greetings to each and every one of our Sangha members. It is such a great honor and delight to be with everyone. I just had a telephone conversation with Bhante Rahula just before that, and then to see him here, it's a nice delight. And so we heard very beautiful stories of the monks who were raised up in non-Buddhist cultures. So they help us to understand how they came to the right view. So listening to them, sometimes we may have it kind of give us an impression that people in the countries where Buddhist culture is strong, we tend to think that maybe they automatically have a right view. So I think we have to be careful. I think as Bhante Rahula's comment on Sri Lanka, as shared by Bhante Jinananda earlier, point to that fact actually. The people who are raised up in the Buddhist culture have a lot of conducive environment to develop right view, definitely. But it doesn't mean that they are all of them necessarily have right view. And because right view is not as simple. We really have to understand the teachings of the Buddha, have to have very reflective mind to develop that. I just want to share one experience with you that my own close family member had severe back pain, and she had to go through a surgery, and she's in her mid 60s. So after she went through surgery, and then there's a post-surgery treatment, and she had to go to physiotherapy sessions. But due to COVID um, cases rising up, and she couldn't go for those treatments. And then eventually she was building up pains, and her surgery helped her a little bit, but didn't really remove her pain and didn't give her mobility back. So I used to call her and bless her and encourage her. But then she was start to tell me that she's going through this pain and this ailment because of her bad karma. And she's blaming herself that, why I have done such a bad karma to go through this sickness. And so she thought that the best way is to suffer through this sickness, not to go to any treatment, and not to take any effort to recover from it, and just be in the pain, and she'll be done with that bad karma. So attributing all the sicknesses and everything to karma is one mistake that we do as people who raised up in a Buddhist culture, we do, but it's not the right view. Right? Definitely, the understanding the working of the karma is a part of the right view. But most of the time, people who believe in karma do not have a proper understanding, particularly people in the Buddhist, living in the Buddhist cultures, can have a wrong understanding of the karma and attributing everything to the karma. So I try to, talk with my, family member and try to help her to understand this, because I think when it comes to, we need to understand the Four Noble Truths in the proper way also, right? And attributing an outer source for all our suffering, like thinking that all our suffering is caused by others, is also wrong view. At the same time, thinking that all the suffering are caused by self alone, like thinking that all the sufferings are exclusively self-caused is also another wrong view. It's not sayankata or parankata, right? Suffering is a conditionally arising phenomenon, causes and conditions. So, and also, so not to attribute to external world, and not also to self-blame, but understanding the suffering as a conditional, conditionally arising phenomena is a proper right view. And also to not to attribute everything to the karma is very important. That will be another wrong view. So I think in that way, we have to be careful also. So so I was trying to help her to understand that sickness and ailments and illnesses are actually part of the life. We don't have to have, I mean, even without a bad karma, we will grow old. And even without a bad karma, we will get sick. And that's the part of this whole organism, this nature. And that's what Buddha tried to help us to understand of this existence. And it's inherently unsatisfied, and it's vulnerable to experience suffering. So even with the good strong karma, you will still get sick and get old. So to accept that rather than try to to be angry with it and self-blame and torture oneself, but simply accept it is helpful. So through my conversation, I think she was able to accept that ailments as a part of our life, and also be grateful for the body. I mean, she was having kind of self-hatred and also disappointment with her own body. but instead of developing, gratitude to this body, which has been helping us, through the life, and accepting, this body has done for us so much, and now it is old, so it's giving this problem. It's not the problem with the body, but this is the nature. So being appreciative of the body and accepting the condition help her to not to suffer actually, but she may have still physical pains, but not to suffer and not to blame herself for that suffering. I think proper understanding of karma is important to have right view.
Wow, amazing! These are amazing stories which depict the beauty, the essence of the right view, how we can develop the right view. Traditional, non-traditional, Eastern, Western stories. These are, I think, I wish I had all the people to watch this program so that they could have a better perspective of today's topic. So Reverend Kema was kind of late today, and I can give you 2 minutes to talk about this right view and your personal experience. What led you to develop the right view? You have to unmute yourself. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't resist coming to this. I am presently in a Catholic monastery in Pune for the Franciscan monks, teaching 15 nuns about the Brahma Viharas. That's where I am. So we started to talk about Eightfold Path, not quite yet, but I will explain what happened in my own life in 2 minutes. This is good. Okay. We take this whole thing, the Eightfold Path, as a hooked up unit, and it's like a tumble wheel. I teach it. It is like mind is the forerunner of all states. And if we can establish a perspective, a correct perspective, and this perspective, right perspective, is a right view, complete right view, we have right perspective or harmonious perspective. And we say to them, this is an impersonal nature. You see, this is part of the anatta. This is the part of the attempt to take no self. Without self, you are selfless instead of selfish. If you are not selfish, if you are living selfless, you can approach your view. And this is what happened to me, shifting from a personal view of everything is happening to me in my life. And the belief of everything happening to me in my life is very, very heavy. It's too few minutes just to try to tell you what really happened for me, but I was in the bottom of the heap, the bottom of everything. One of the things happened to me was so many people died in my family in a short period of time, 6 or 7 people in 10 months, that I could not get over it. And it crushed me and crushed some other people in my family. And what I found was looking at the idea of the impersonal perspective, watch what happens is that if you are approaching everything impersonally, then you're looking at precisely what's happening. What is essential? What is unessential? We teach this in the morning in our service, and you look for this in everything. So what was essential was what exactly is happening? Is everything in life happening to me, or the Buddha has turned this all around? And he has said that instead of a subjective and objective view of me and an object and what is happening to me, by turning it around in the experience, suddenly nothing is happening from me. But in a short time, you can have a person understand everything is happening from me. How is that working? Well, because if I have a impersonal nature for my view of everything impersonally, I look at things more precisely and see what is actually happening. And then what happens is my images in my mind change, because they are going to be, the thought will change. And this is like a tumble wheel, this Eightfold Path. If we take it apart too much, then we don't see that the whole thing is connected and can change everything. Change is very important, because change if in Buddhism is saying to you, I can show you how you can change yourself. You see, you can change everything that has happened in your life. Instead of to you, nothing has happened to you. What if you play the game? What if nothing has happened to you? What if everything has happened from you? Now let's look at what that means. If the Buddha says perspective in the view is impersonal, then all of a sudden you will choose right thoughts in your mind. And these will be pure thoughts. Impersonal images will be allowed to be in your mind. You see, your communication will change, not just your speech, your personal actions, your personal dress, the personal way you walk, the way you communicate with your whole body will change. And then what happens next is that it will change, the action will change. How? Because the movement of your mind will change, because you will be looking at things from a different angle, a different view. And when I changed the way that I was thinking, the way that my mind was starting, isn't mind the forerunner of all states? Oh, well, then maybe it means I can change. Many people in the world today, they believe they hate themselves. They think everything is happening to them. They are being crushed the way I was in the beginning, and they do not believe change is possible. There's a whole group of people I met once that believed, the whole family, nothing can change. He's that way forever. She's that way forever. This is not true. And the neuroscience tells us this is not true. The mind can be purified, the Buddha found, and then the mind is purified, the actions will change. You see? This is how it worked, and that is what happened. And then from there, the lifestyle changes. And when you change your lifestyle, you purify, your lifestyle changes because of your view being changed, then the livelihood definitely, the wrong livelihoods are not going to come in. Yeah. Okay, but your whole lifestyle is changing because you want to set your lifestyle up so that you can change and everything about it you consider, and you started to change. And this is what happened. And this is what happened. My discussion with Bhante, the first few nights I ever meditated in the Washington Buddhist Vihara, we had tea one night. Afterwards, we had tea before I went back to my apartment, okay? And I told him the whole story, and I was devastated. And at the end, I asked him a question. I want to know from you, Bhante, am I crazy? I didn't know what that meant back then. Am I insane? What has happened? Is it insane, the whole thing? He said to me, there's nothing wrong with you. You are living in the hell realms, and the Buddha can show you the way to climb out. And the Buddha can show you the way to climb out when you change your perspective. And the perspective tumbles to images, the images tumbles to communication, the communication tumbled down to the movement, the action in life, the action tumbled down to the lifestyle that changed. And then the practice, the right effort turned out, once we pinned down exactly what right effort actually was, 4 steps. 2 of them purify the mind. The other 2 steps, they retrain the mind. Yeah. Recognizing unwholesome mind states, the beginning of everything. Yeah. Recognizing unwholesome mind states, and then releasing those unwholesome mind states, relaxing your mind. The mind relaxes, the body cools down, and it relaxes too.
Yeah, that is
you
what
see it's all hooked together. Yes, this is all hooked together. And then when that happens, you have right effort. Those 2 steps have purified, but then you smile. And when you smile, because you feel better, when you smile, then your life starts to change. Because you feel better, you get better, and you are able to do things in the right direction. It's a wonderful thing, wonderful thing. And then what happens is, mindfulness is actually a skilled kind of observation I can show you. And when you close your eyes, I've had some people say, but there's nothing there, I'm going to fall asleep. No, you're not fall asleep. If you watch closely, you can learn a lot of things when you close your eyes. Even in the beginning of your meditation, you will learn things. Don't move. Don't move an inch and just watch the screen inside. Tell yourself, Sister Kama said, go to the movies, and I didn't tell you what was there. Just sit and watch the screen and it will happen. You see?
Yeah. So
And
Venerable,
and the mindfulness goes to concentration, and then the whole life changed.
Yeah.
This is what happens. But the key piece of everything is your mind. First verses in the Dhammapada. True is true, right?
Yeah. So,
That's why I woke up.
I wish I had more time for you. Today, actually, I'm so taken by all these inspiring stories that came from you. And as a final thought, Bhante Yogavachar Rahula, can you just wrap up this in 1 minute about right view? We can't hear you, Bhante.
Are you coming back to me? I'm sorry.
No, Bhante Rahula.
Okay, Rahula.
But I think the mic, there's something
Can you
wrong
hear me
with.
now?
Okay, now we can hear you, Bhante.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was some technical difficulties.
Okay. So,
well, as we can see, you know, everyone has come to the Dhamma in different ways.
yeah.
And that's very wonderful. And that's a wonderful thing about the teachings of the Buddha, that, you know, all we have to do is start thinking clearly about what we are doing in life. And we all have the truth essentially deep within us. And we just have to give that a chance to come out by start, you know, questioning. So all these different experiences that we've heard this evening are just, you know, people's individual ways of coming to the Dhamma and the way that they have come to the right view. And as was mentioned, everything comes from right view.
Yeah.
And if your views are right, your life will be right. If your views are wrong, then everything else becomes wrong.
That's right. That's
That's all I have to do.
Yeah, beautiful said, Bhante Rahula. So I'm very grateful today. We also have the presence of Bhante Nanda from Rhode Island and of Bhante Sila from Minnesota. Thank you, Bhante, for joining us. And of course, Bhante Muniputto from Seattle. And thank you for joining this discussion. And actually today, I'm very, very happy to listen to all the inspiring stories, you know, because you had a different perspective, different view prior to you become a monk and nun, and then what led you to become a monk and nun, and the things that you did, how you developed the right view, how right view set you into the right direction to become who you are right now. So I'm very grateful to you. May you have all the blessings of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha for long life with good health, and so that you can share more stories with us. So to end today's program, I would like to respectfully invite Bhante Uparatana from Washington, D.C. to recite the Patimokkha Desana Gatha. Bhante, you have to unmute yourself. Bhante Uparatana, unmute yourself first.
Thank you, Venerable Sirs. That's you done. Wonderful thing. We're very happy to hear all that Dhamma contribution to the Dhamma. Thank you. Wish you all long life and good health for everyone. Sabba papasa akaranang kusalasa upasampada sachit pariyodapanang etam buddhana sasanang khanti paramantapotitikka nibbanam paramang vadanti buddha nahi pabbajito parupagati samano hoti parang vihetayanto anupavado අනුපගාතෝ පාතිමොක්කේච සංවරෝ මත්තඤ්ඤුතාච භත්තස්මින් පන්තංච සයනාසනං අධිචිත්තේච ආයෝගෝ ඒතං බුද්ධාන සාසනං.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bantu Paratana, for beautifully reciting the Padimokka Desana verses. And I'm hoping to see all of you in 2 weeks' time. And once again, I'm very grateful to all of you. May you have all the blessings of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha for your health and safety. May you live long with all happiness and peace. May all blessings be with you. And until we meet again in 2 weeks' time, may you have a wonderful day and good night from Canada. Thank you.